And we're back once again, only on its last call. Last call of the alcohol, only on the last call podcast.com. And joining me here on location, once again, we always love having him on the show because he pulls no punches, takes no dives, and he is one of the hardest working men in all of the country. He has his own podcast, wrestling promotion. He has a secret job in the government you won't talk about, but he's high up in the food chain here. And well, he's back once again to talk all things pro wrestling in and out of a squared circle. I give you once again the man, the myth, legend, the man with the 26-inch natural pythons. I give you it's Kevin Apollo. So Kevin, let's start off here with the big news. Yeah, that's right. ESPN starting in 2026 will be streaming every premium live event on ESPN's direct to consumer platform. By the way, it's been pointed out if you have ESPN on your cable network, you too can also not have to pay this. So let's start off the bat here right now. Is this good? Is this bad? And if you are a WB fan, how much are you looking at going, oh crap, I'm going to like take a third mortgage out to view all the freaking WWE content.
Well, so I mean, the good news is that if, like I said, if you have cable or if you already have Hulu, and most people have Hulu as opposed to D Plus or the failed ESPN Plus, you don't have to pay. So at first, yeah, when they first announced this, and it looked like we were all going to be dropping 29.99 a month, for what for seven pay-per-views, this was going to be an unmitigated disaster. The other thing that's interesting too is that the ink hasn't actually been put to paper yet for this deal. So I feel like Disney forced them to make this announcement, because it all coincided with the miserable shareholders meeting, the Gina Carano news. We had to throw up a lot of smoke screens, which is probably why this was so discombobulated. But listen, as much of a disaster as ESPN was for the UFC, I do understand the logic behind it. This was only about the name brand. This was about tying the WWE logo to ESPN because we know that ESPN is kind of is a broken brand. It's broken, it's broke, and it's pretty close to as dying as you can get without the actual dying part. But it is still the number one name in sports, and the WWE is looking for that maximum exposure, any way to increase their mainstream status, and that's all this was about. I won't be shocked if we find that this deal is a very short one. Um, and also they got paid a boatload of money for this. I think we got another million with a B out of it for them. I think it was 1.5 or something like that.
1.6 billion for a
Yeah.
5 year deal. And look, this I understand the logic because as we've seen in Unreal, Unreal, we've seen the last couple of years. I mean, whether it's this is the one thing you can say that The Rock, Triple H, Nick Khan, and Ari Emanuel all have in common. They are celebrity, bleepers. They love
Mhm.
hanging out with celebrities, mainstream stars, premium athletes, and the fact that hey, we can do now a pay-per-view right during Super Bowl weekend. Oh my God, we can get Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley and Patrick Mahomes on a WB card, even if it's just hanging out backstage. Like they want the rub. They want to be able to go, hey, we're on the number one sports network. We're on Disney, branded ESPN. Stephen A. Smith is going to be talking WWE. That gets them horny as hell.
Yeah, no, it's true though. It's true. Listen, I don't blame them for chasing the celebrities. That's a big part of why the WWF wound up where it was. Vince. It's no secret. Vince wanted to be a record promoter, not a wrestling guy. He wanted to be Mr. Motown. And in that he took his love of music and understanding that you need in order to really tap into the zeitgeist, you need the people who drive it. So this isn't shocking, and it should not be shocking to anybody. We've seen over what the last almost 20 years, it went from being like a dried up TV act actors and soap actors to A-listers. Some of them happy to be there, some of them not so happy to be there. The Bradley Cooper A-Team episode. the you know the but the trend is still there, and as we get further and further along, they're in a space now where, especially because of social media, you're seeing more and more celebrities openly discuss their love for WWE, the WWE product. So why not do things that make it easier? At this point, it's fair to say that the WWE pretty much has the majority of professional athletes in their pocket. The and their foothold with Hollywood is ever increasing. The more popular John Cena and Batista become, it makes it easier for the current gen to break in. The Seth Rollins was supposed to be in that Captain America movie. I think Becky's got something to do with that awful Starfleet Academy show, but it doesn't matter that it's awful. She's in it. And she'll feature in it. It's making it easier for these guys to cross over, and when that happens, that's more money, it's more favorability, it's more profit for the WWE. And that's, listen, at the end of the day, they are not just a publicly traded company, but they are first a business, and that is the name of business. You got to earn. If you're not earning, you're dying. the you know it's look at the other guys, and it's not a knock on not a knock, but TNA struggled because they couldn't figure out how to earn and grow. NWA is stifled, and working with local promoters to try to keep the name out there, but that is not growth. AEW loses 20% of its audience annually for the last 5 years. That is a death cycle. The the right now, people do like to say that wrestling's never been more popular than it's ever been. It's never been bigger, but that is a misnomer. The WWE has never been bigger. The WWE has never been more popular. And people who like to try to diminish that, and, well, Austin and da 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 da. Nope. The we are it is a radically different creature. You don't have to be Austin levels of over to to be a part of the cultural zeitgeist. You know, Roman is a massive, massive star. We just saw a video of people walking around Walt Disney, of Disneyland, and the guy had on a Roman shirt, and people are acknowledging the tribal chief. That means that people are aware of his presence, and we're not talking about the strength of the wrestling fan bubble. We're talking about mainstream exposure and people recognizing these things, without them having to be labeled as a specific wrestling fan. That was always the goal for Vince, and looks like they finally got there. So it's again, I'm not shocked. This is what they want, and they're going to take ESPN for all it's worth, for all the name value it's worth. And if Disney can afford them when it's all said and done, because this will drive viewers, this will drive subscribers. Um, this will keep people from cutting the cord, or dumping Hulu when it merges into Disney Plus. The WB is a powerful driver. We look at what they did for Peacock. Peacock is a terrible streaming service. It's a nothing burger of a service. The only thing good about it was all that NBC Universal content, from the '80s, and they don't even have it. They don't even have 90% of it up. They don't have 90% of the Universal movie library up. You got to go to Pluto, Pluto or Amazon Prime if you want to see Universal's content. So the WWE was a big driver in getting people to sign up and getting people to keep it. So I expect no less from ESPN. The 29.99 price point, be damned. I do think Nick Khan is correct in a certain aspect that the majority of the fan base is at a is at an economic level where most of it can swing it. What sucks is, and this is a problem with all major sports, and we talked about it before, is that there seems to be this trend where we are leaving the blue collar family behind. The and that is problematic. You're looking at SummerSlam had $5,000 seats. You know, it's the house show schedule's been greatly reduced, and now we're ignoring the smaller markets, which frankly is a massive opportunity for AEW. It should have been a signal to start running house shows, their own house shows, because they needed groundswell support. But the WWE unfortunately is following the trend of the NFL, the NBA, and the MLB. The only league that seems to not want to screw its fans over is hockey.
Here's the other worry is that ESPN, whenever you sign with ESPN, they get their hooks into you.
Mm-hmm.
And as you can probably ask for UFC, you can probably ask boxing, you can ask now the NFL because the NFL Red Zone is now with ESPN. They're going to they're going to influence you in a lot of ways. They'll have constructive criticism that you kind of have to listen to. They'll want to produce certain things that you have to go along with. I mean, you get the money, well, that's great, but we want to say in this. So we don't know yet, but how much should we worry? Like all of a sudden, like SummerSlam runs a bit longer. Clash in Paris runs a bit longer because, oh, hey, we got to get those commercials in there. We got to get the ESPN even throwing in commercials for, their women's soccer or the college football or college baseball. Next thing you know, it's like, God damn it. It's a 5-hour friggin' pay-per-view and an hour of them are friggin' commercials.
I wouldn't worry about that. The WWE is masterful at working things into the show that don't disrupt the flow of the show. I mean, one of the genius parts of of Vince's the way Vince formatted Raw and even the pay-per-views is they found a way to run commercials inside of the show without actually running commercials, which was a major headache, for the networks, for the networks that were looking to, cash in on some of these advertising deals. So the WWE will find a way to massage these advertisements, and it won't be. It's only a matter of time before Caitlin Clark pops up, in a backstage segment, and they talk about whatever they got to talk about. But at the same time, too, listen, when someone writes you a $1.6 billion check and says we're going to stick around for 5-6 years, they're going to have input. And the other part of it too, though, is you got to look at who we're working with here. You have a lot of people inside of TKO who came from ESPN, and in any professional environment, professionals like to only work with people that they trust or people that they've done business with before because their behavior, their responses are predictable, and you have an idea of who actually has your back or not, right? Because it is a cutthroat position. What's his name? Nick Shapiro. It's not shocking, or Lee Fitting. It's not shocking that they want to ESPN because they have friends and colleagues there. So it's a lot easier to have those conversations. Hey, listen, this is how we do things. We're gonna make it work, but don't expect us to throw the baby out with the bathwater. To do it. We're gonna find a way to smooth it and massage it in. And we need you guys to understand that. And I'm sure that was a conversation that was had, before anybody made any announcements. These discussions take months, months if not years. So I'm sure there'll be some changes, but I don't think it's gonna be anything super duper drastic. And the WWE is very responsive. So if it does go to hell, you will see them push back to fix the problem. Hold on one second.
So once again, fans, if you're just tuning in, it is to clarify this here. Yes, WWE is agreed to terms with ESPN to stream all their WWE premium live events on ESPN's direct-to-consumer platform. That does not mean, though, that you have to pay $29.99 extra if you already have ESPN as part of your cable deal. So for all those who are ready to just cut the cord and get rid of everything. No. If you have ESPN with YouTube TV or Xfinity or Verizon or AT&T or anybody else, yes, you still can keep watching WB PLEs, not to worry about paying an extra amount of months. So that's there. Final topic on this: how does this affect the UFC? Because this could have, they've had their issues with ESPN. Granted, the UFC and the WWE are different beasts. Like it's easy to get to go cool and hip for a W event because you'll see the celebrities every time. You'll see the WWE stars. UFC, not so much. So how does this affect, not just UFC's TV view, but all TV deal going forward? But how does it affect maybe Nick Khan and Mark Shapiro? Because right now, as a bunch of people have told me, like Nick Khan's getting more and more power within TKO. Mark Shapiro is starting to feel the pinch.
Yeah, I was other than the name, the power of the brand. I was actually fascinated that they even wanted to do this, knowing all the problems that the UFC had. The so it's a fascinating dynamic. But listen, if anything, I would say that it probably gives the UFC a little more leverage, right? The ESPN is going to want to keep everybody under one roof. They're going to want one big happy family. The Or they're going to be nervous that if we bring in, both sides of TKO, the TKO can really smack us around. But Disney doesn't think of things in that terms because they're Disney. They're too big. They're too big. They're too diversified. I would think this would be a positive for ESPN because they have the ability to say, "Hey, you guys screwed us over. We lost money on this. We lost exposure on this. You guys got to do better, or we're walking out the door. And do you really want us walking out the door when you can look at all the cross marketing and free sync that we can give you by partnering with our corporate sister in the WWE, or now that ESPN, now that rather UFC is free, it gives them even bigger negotiating power to go land someplace that may be desperate. Who's to say that NBC Universal, is like, oh my gosh, UFC's out there. We've got that Comcast money to throw around, unlike the WB. And they don't find a new home. I don't see any real negatives in it for the UFC at all. To be honest, they've got fantastic negotiating power, and the streaming landscape, as chaotic as it is at this point, I'll say, is over relying on live sports. But sports and sports related content is the only thing that is a proven moneymaker right now. So if you're out there and you have the ability to cash in, go cash in.
Speaking of cashing in and UFC and WWE, that's right. This guy is back. All you IWC people, and even Dan Cormier, who said no, he's on the naughty list. He's not coming back. That's right. He's back. The one guy that, as Kevin Paulo says, all soy boys fear, hate, and secretly want to be like Brock Lesnar returned at SummerSlam, walked in, beat the hell out of John Cena, walked out, and now we're getting Cena versus Brock Lesnar final story here.
Yep. Well, not just that, had all three of his brand new shirts be the top merchandise sellers in the entire company. So clearly, no one's that upset about Brock being back, except for IWC simps.
So I was here's the slight argument I had with certain people, including this. Like, should we have always expected this because he is a TKO star? He is the one guy. He's even bigger than Travis Scott in terms of popularity worldwide, and he's the one guy you can look at and go, he is a legit athlete crossover star. Like he was a UFC champion who came from WWE. He is a guy that you look and go, freak athlete. Like when you check all the boxes, how much should we have looked at this and went, yeah, Brock's coming back. This might have been a vacation, but he was eventually going to come back.
Brock was always going to come back. It was just a matter of when and in what capacity. At the end of the day, I know it's an unpopular opinion to espouse, in a public setting, but the, you know, I'm sorry, we got to really be honest about what's going on here with this lawsuit. This chick is upset that she didn't get her final payday. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to deduce that her lawyer said play the victim. It's going to be the easiest way to get you your payday. And in turn, start dropping names because the more people we put into this, the more pressure there's going to be to settle. We can look at it like think of it like the old Michael Jackson case, right? Michael Jackson never wanted to settle. He was willing and ready to fight that to the very bitter end. Sony said, stop. You've got a tour coming up. You've got an album coming out. You can't be on tour if you're sitting in a courtroom fighting this case. That album is not going to sell as well if you're not out here marketing. So we need you to make this go away. And look at what happened. People equate settling with guilt. They just do. Listen, same thing on the with this Gina Carano case, right? Um, Disney settled, and people are doing a victory lap because they equate settling with guilt. Vince is not going to settle. Vince will fight this down to the end. She herself said Brock did nothing wrong. If you actually read what went on between the two of them, she sent him pictures of her doing something gross. He called her a nasty bitch, and then followed up with claiming that that weather issues were why he was not going to make their hookup. Any grown ass man on this earth, especially in the AOL and on era, will tell you that inclement weather is not stopping you from traveling to go get laid. It's just not a thing. You do that when you don't want to be there. Brock clearly did not want to be there. The the Brock probably look at whatever gross ass pictures Vince showed him, yes. But we all have that one friend who's a pig who goes, oh, look at the thing I did. And you're like, yeah, that's great, bud. Thanks, bro. I got it. Brock Lesnar did no wrong. We are talking about a publicly traded company. They have a fiduciary responsibility to mitigate risk. By that means that they are legally bound to not do anything that can cause any harm and impede the flow of profit or damage the brand in terms of how it is viewed favorably in the public. Once she said Brock did nothing wrong, it was just simply a matter of time of waiting for this stupid, unnecessary story to be out of the news cycle. And for everybody to move on. The Brock is the #2 single greatest sports attraction in the history of the world. Flat out. The first being Andre the Giant. Brock has been in the NFL, NCAA, NFL, WWE, the UFC. The guy's appeared in a Madden, wrestling games, and UFC games. He's the only athlete to ever do that. Probably will be the only athlete to ever do that too. So Brock Lesnar's name carries a lot of weight. When Brock Lesnar shows up in wrestling, it is a license to print money. Right now, Vince McMahon, Triple H and Nick Khan are like Tony and Sosa during the montage in Scarface, where you're watching the money go through the bill counters. They're just laughing. They're laughing with each other on the phone. I think the only thing that probably slowed it down is Brock is fiercely loyal, right? Brock is fiercely loyal. And when Vince was forced out, Brock left with Vince. And flat out said, if the old man goes, I go. So, it all depends on what is Vince's relationship with Triple H and his daughter right now. Because that was probably going to be the big determinant. The Brock is probably only really back because it's not like he needs the money. Brock is probably only really back so that because John Cena wanted Brock to come back, so they could tell one last story. And then Brock decided he was going to get paid buku bucks to do it. After John Cena's gone, you do have to ask yourself, well, what is really left for Brock Lesnar to do? Um, Brock is a very smart businessman. People don't give him a lot of credit for what he has done and the business that he was willing to do, and the fact that he understands how and where to protect himself. Um, the what's really left for Brock to do after this? You know what? Maybe he comes back to make Obafemi.
Or
The
Braun Breaker. Like, yeah, you that's
Braun,
it. That's the question that you have. Like, who looks realistic that you can put Brock Lesnar in a ring with and go, he'll look and go, yeah, I can see myself, quote unquote, losing to this guy because he looks like he could kick my ass. Like even Gunther, it's like, man, Gunther. I mean, and I give Gunther credit; he's a fantastic wrestler. I'm not big on the personality or his thoughts on wrestling fans, but still a great wrestler. But to wrestle Brock Lesnar, you have to be a big, huge box office star like a Cody, or you have to look like a guy who can physically go toe to toe, and he's not going to look and go, I could kill you within 2 minutes.
Well, listen, Brock Lesnar. Listen, I don't understand everybody's hate of Gunther. Gunther is a throwback. Gunther's a throwback heel, man. That is, he's just a no frills, just evil foreign heel who's gotten himself in tremendous shape, even versus when he was first, was at NXT UK. He's towering, he's menacing, and he cuts a good promo. It's not a lot of flash there, but he delivers. He's consistent. And I think people need to go back and rewatch the Million Dollar Man speech and learn, that it's not always about being the biggest, the brightest, and the best. A lot of the times it's about who is the most consistent, who is the most trustworthy, who is the most reliable. Gunther is reliable. That Gunther is going to make whoever he gets in the ring with look good. And that it wins over Gunther actually means something. So that said, sure, when Brock's ready to go or whatever he wants to do with his time, Gunther wrestling Brock elevates Gunther. If you get to go with Brock and you're in there with Brock, it elevates you. It doesn't have to be a mega long knockout drag out match. People don't want that from Brock Lesnar. Look at what Brock did for Joe. That match was very short, but Joe was one of the few people who was able to actually dominate Brock going into the feud. He threw him the clutch a couple of times. They had a knockdown drag. There was a straight up Haas fight, and it just came down to Brock hit his finish, and the match was over. Look at what he did for Balor. He kicked the shit out of Balor, but he let Finn keep kicking out, and it elevated Finn. Look at what look at what Brock did for Cody. There was no reason on God's green earth that Cody should have ever feasibly beaten Brock Lesnar, but Brock Lesnar told the story and made it make sense. And when Cody finally got that win, it elevated Cody's status in the minds and eyes of the fans. That is the power of Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar has hit that Undertaker status. Listen. Undertaker is the greatest big man of all time, but and his retirement has become, has hit that weird Ric Flair section of the world where he's become a part of modern pop culture. But Brock Lesnar is a different kind of box office. Brock Lesnar has mainstream crossover appeal. Brock Lesnar comes with an air of legitimacy that can't be duplicated. So when you wrestle with Brock, it does nothing but do good things for you. But at the same, like we said, Brock is very selective with who he gets in there with because he understands he needs to protect his legacy. And it's up to the person to be able to answer the call of the beast.
Well, this leads us to our next topic. That is the man, the myth, the legend, Drew McIntyre. Well, this guy here just is spitting barbs, talking trash. I love this guy here, but there's a lot of people we don't. Recently, he said in the West Sport that he offered harsh criticism to a large portion of our current roster. Quote, 85% of the roster doesn't look like wrestlers. Um, I have a lot of friends that tune into Netflix and the first time and they're like, wait a minute, I could beat up this guy. My kid could probably beat up this kid. Um, he goes on to say that some of them do not ask for veteran advice, that they should, that they need, some of the roster needs to dial in. They start needing to looking like athletes. And I love this here. But I guess there's some things I want to construct. First, what does a superstar look like? Because I could make an argument, and this guy is over like Rover, but Dominic Mysterio doesn't look like a pro wrestler. He looks like a guy who could blend in with the average fan. He's now, granted, he's not in bad shape. He's just a smaller guy in an era where pro wrestlers are more smaller than we were ever used to.
Oh, but I say Dominic looks like a superstar. Dominic doesn't look like a wrestler, but he looks like a superstar. Part of it is your it's I guess the only really good word for it is your aura. Dominic projects stardom at the end of the day. And he looks very different. Dominic will stand out in a crowd just from how he carries, his haircuts, the clothing that he wears. It's all pretty much an ensemble package. Where kind of like what some of what Drew was talking about is, um, it's the I want to be a wrestler group versus the I'm here to be a superstar group. The you know the what I guess the better way to kind of break this down is old school NBA versus new school NBA. Now, I'm talking a lot of the pre post show group. Back in the day, Jordan era, everybody was dressed in super tight suits. Same thing with the NFL. If you were out and there was going to be a camera on you, you were dressed in a suit. The reason that you did this was because it separated you from everybody else. When you're walking around in t-shirt and jeans, or you're in shorts and you got the cutoffs and all that other crap, you look like everybody else walking around in the street. And when you are an athlete, especially a professional athlete who's being paid buku bucks, your job is to be larger than life. You have to be set apart from. It's a part of building the mystique too. A lot of these guys are hell bent on just wanting to blend in and not be any different. And when you say you're no different than the guy who paid a ticket to watch you, that means that you intrinsically have less value. Um, Dominic kind of writes the line of, if you look real quick, you could think it's Eddie, but when you look at his face, he looks just like his father, Ray. He dresses different. He's like half of his clothing are throwback to an entirely different era. He just looks different now. Listen, and we keep forgetting Dominic is very young, but Dominic is also young enough that he has plenty of time to put on, the mass needed to ascend to the next level, right? Like Dominic is going to be someone who is in that perpetual mid card, either that perpetual mid card IC title, US title, whatever random other belt we decide to cook up, if when we need a flavor of the month title. And but if Dominic wants to go be world champion, well, Dominic's going to need to put on poundage. Same thing with early Drew McIntyre, right? Early Drew McIntyre had an incredible pedigree, right? But we understand 97% of the time, if you want to be a main eventer in the WWE, you need to look a certain way. You need to look like a killer, like a machine. Drew McIntyre gets released, and within less than a year, radically transforms his body, grows the beard, changes his whole demeanor, and becomes this title-winning menace, across any TV that's willing to pay to put him on it. Rather any company that's TV that's willing to pay to put him on it. Right? The guy showed up in TNA and was an absolute menace, and then almost immediately gets re-signed back. Goes to NXT, has the big debut. The place loses their mind. Of course, he gets the title right away, and of course, he got called up right away. It was, when you look the part, you get treated like the part. The yeah, and a lot of folks don't have that. I think that mentality is missing. It's especially missing on the indies. It's virtually non-existent right now in the indies. The but again, same thing, old school Lex Luger mentality. People used to bitch him on about Lex, but Lex treated himself like a star. Lex dressed differently than everybody. He traveled differently than everybody. He tried to speak differently than everybody. He carried himself differently than everybody. The Lex Luger was a superstar, before people were willing to start calling it that. The
So
that,
let
that
me,
that's a big part of the mentality that Drew
yeah.
was talking about. It's not about being, not in shape. Like, it's the WWE, man. Like, it's Braden Walk. What's his name? Chris Harris is the only person I've ever seen go to the WWE and get fat.
I'm trying to put this in a polite way. Sometimes you are that's as big as you can get, and yeah, we talk about Drew. Drew's a big guy though. He's 6'5", so he
Mhm.
was probably about 235, 225 when he was early WWE. He's put on weight and it frame fit, and he looks like a monster. Roman Reigns can sometimes walk around just jeans and a t-shirt. Doesn't matter. He's still a monster. He's a guy that he walks into a bar, you look and go, "Ooh, I'm not gonna piss him off."
Mhm.
What happens though when it's guys like Finn Balor, when it's guys like Johnny Gargano, guys like even I would say Motor City Machine Guns? They're in great shape. They take care of themselves. There is muscle definition. The fact is, they're 5'9", 5'11", not 190 pounds. It just, yeah, they're average looking guys. They look like they could blend in with regular people. You could put a suit on them, but at the end of the day, it's like, what do you get when you put lipstick on a pig? A pig with lipstick. I mean,
Sure.
how much does it hurt that for Drew? I get it. He says this, but there's only so many Brock Lesnar's and Drew McIntyre's, and
Yeah.
the pro
No.
wrestling is filled of guys who are just now they couldn't do football. They couldn't do hockey because they're not big enough. That's
Yeah.
why they're going to pro
Well,
wrestling now.
I was a part. I just again,
Chad
this.
Gable's a perfect example.
Yeah.
Chad Gable is a very small guy. He could beat the dog shit out of you and me combined.
Hmm.
But he's still, and he's in
He's a
fantastic
yeah.
shape.
Well,
He's still
again,
5'8". So what can you do to fix that?
but well, his height. Listen, we're in the Triple H era. Height is less of a determinant, right? It's really just, it's really just about being. It's about, again. It's not so much the physicality. It's it's how your personality manifests and how you carry yourself. The Why is Finn Balor able to be a star even though, your average teenage daughter is taller than him? It's because he projects a star's mentality. It's why no, even though they don't quite know what to do with him, he's still a regular fixture on TV and will always get a reaction. You know, he he carries himself a little differently. He experiments with how he looks. The But he also, you can throw him on TV and he's gonna be a fine representative. The A lot of times it comes down to what have you done to make yourself a superstar? Because it's the wrestling, it's the in order to cross over, right? You have to do one thing first. You have to get over with the actual wrestling audience. You have to get over with the actual wrestling audience, and a lot of the times, and I don't mean like middle of the road. I know your name, so I give you a reaction. I mean, like, if you're not on TV, I'm pissed I don't see you on TV, or you really super drive on the storyline. The Or someone goes, hey, there's something there. We're going to put some steam behind this guy. Or in a case like Ethan Page, where you like where the CW just loves the dude. The What have you done as a character, that's going to define you, that your personality is synonymous with how you look and how you dress. The Again, it's not about being in shape. You're in the WWE, you're going to be in shape. That is more of a problem for everybody else, because I've said it here before. When you go into professional wrestling, the meat and potatoes of it is that this is a throwback to the gladiator games, and no one was paying to see a skinny concave chest slave, and a fat slob walk around to go fight each other and or fight some lions. They wanted to see the beast of men fight other beastly men, and then go fight the beast themselves. No one is, no one's writing stories about, no one's writing stories about Hercules' neighbor, Donoclus, who was like, who was 80% body fat and breathing heavy when he went to go pick some grapes. There's no there there. The It is the large. It's the what have you done to make yourself larger than life? Again, look at Shawn Michaels. Shawn Michaels is not a big dude. The even you know it was the '80s, so fine. The Rockers were pretty puffy, but look at what happens when you hit the '90s and this and the trial begins. Shawn goes from being out here to being in here, and is more of a flyer. But compared to everybody else in the roster, even Brett was bigger than Shawn. Meanwhile, you could put Shawn in the ring with anybody that you wanted to, and Shawn's personality was bigger than whoever he was in there with most of the time. It's why it was believable that you could throw him up against Sid, you could throw him up against a Diesel, you could throw him up against a Taker, even Vader. Right. Look. Granted, there's layers to that story, but at the end of the day, Shawn Michaels' personality totally dwarfed the persona that was Vader. So a lot of this is how you conduct yourself and how you carry yourself, and not so much your physical stature. Physical stature does play a big role in it. Yes, you have to be in shape. You have to look like you can go kick some ass. The and yes, when you're larger than 6'2", when you're bigger than 6'2", and you're above the 230 mark, it makes life a hell of a lot easier. But then you've also seen a lot of people flame out. Like look at Baracus. There was no reason that a massive German who looked like he was a Masters of the Universe figure failed. He should have been a major name. He wasn't. Look at Furnace and LaFon. God, let's see.
Well, Furnace and LaFon, and that comes to some of my
you know,
points. Like Shawn Michaels is, yeah, you bring up Shawn Michaels. He's the outlier, though. I mean, how many guys have a bigger than life personality? That's like saying, oh, Conor McGregor was able to get over, and he was a small guy. Yeah, Conor McGregor was, basically charisma wrapped in a small little package. Like, though they're the I'd say the outliers. They're the ones that are the once in a generation. You get a lot of
mhm.
guys though, and as I
Yeah,
said,
but that's the
Motor
name
City
of the game,
Machine
though.
Guns, DIY, at
But
Fraxium,
yeah,
even to an extent, I would say a lot of guys over in Judgment Day. That's what they are. And there's
but
nothing
again,
wrong.
though,
They're in
that's
great shape. They
yeah.
take care of themselves.
But
They're
again,
just not big personalities. So
that's it. But that's
after a
the name
while,
of
you
the
look and
game,
go,
and that's why they are where they are. That's the name of the game. The name of the game is being a big personality, being a big personality. The or being able to ramp it up when you need to. That's why only but so many people get to be WWE champion, or get to work with the WWE champion, or be in the top main event slot. You find a way to connect. The Again, one of the hey, why do we not see the demon? Well, because Vince said, I need to see if you can do this without the demon. And what did Balor do? To Balor's credit, he worked on it and he figured it out. And yeah, at some point in time, Balor will wind up being champion again. There's no doubt about it. He signed a super long deal. The And it'll circle his way. And when you look at how the Judgment Day storyline has been crafted, the Judgment Day storyline is crafted specifically to keep Finn Balor in the running, but not have him actually vying for the title, while also growing Dominic's character. Right? The Dominic at his stature should have not caught anyone's attention. Right? Let's be honest. Right? He shouldn't have caught anybody's attention yet. But what happened? We had giant until he got over as a babyface when they put him with Liv. Um, they were legitimately booing Dominic out of the building. They were booing the guy out of the building to the point that people thought it was piped in. And you go to the show and like, no, it's not. You look at the reaction that he got in AAA. The Dominic's personality, and how he carries himself and his promo work, and in turn supplemented, not accentuated, but supplemented, by how he dresses and carries himself, has catapulted him, catapulted him to the level of star that he is. The fact of the matter is, if Dominic wants to be an even bigger star, Dominic's got to find a way to get bigger. And Dominic's a tall kid, so that just means, hey kid, go work out and gain a little extra mass. The and height, again, height in Triple H era doesn't really mean too much, And again, again, I love the machine guns; they're phenomenal, but they're not exactly charisma machines. But they are workhorses, so they're going to give you spectacular. They're going to give you these spectacle matches, but how often are you going to really throw a microphone in front of them? Same thing with Gargano. Gargano, I've said 1,000 times, Gargano is the anti-pop. When he comes out, it is a complete and total and utter absence of sound. Um, so there's, but he is where he is. He has a particular skill set that they happen to like. He does pre-tape really well, but they don't really give him a live mic, for reasons. The I guess I can't remember who else but again, that's what I'm saying. I mentioned the other guys because, like, hey, listen, it's not just all about size. Because if that was the case, there would have been a lot of guys who would have been heavyweight champion. But you still have to connect, and once you connect, it's what pulls it all together. Again, Bobby Lashley isn't exactly the world's greatest orator. He cuts a competent promo, but he looks like a Greek god. When you get the formula together, it works. Hurt Business works for a reason. The it's about aura. It helps if you have legitimacy, right? It helps if you have legitimacy. Who's more legitimate than a U.S. Army Ranger who fought in the UFC? The Lashley has stacked bodies that we're never going to hear about because we don't have the governmental clearance to know about what he's done. The people don't really understand what U.S. Army Rangers are tasked with doing. The Shelton, right? Shelton Bender was a hell of an athlete, an amateur athlete. The he chose to go a different way, but Shelton helped train Brock. But he's legitimate. You talk about a group of men who could stretch whoever the hell it is they wanted to anytime they want to, and it doesn't matter how. It'll be like you could drop the entirety of the AEW roster and have them attack them all at once. All three of those men are walking out, and I'd be shocked if any of them actually had to rip their suits, to take everybody else out. Or look at Wardlow, right? Wardlow has a lot of charisma. Oh no, rather Wardlow has a phenomenal look, but not a lot of charisma. If Wardlow had the charisma to crack through, Wardlow, even by accident, would have would have found a way to punch through and kind of still stay relevant. Um, he looks phenomenal, and he needs to get someplace else that'll teach him how to be the kind of talent that he can be. But like sometimes some guys just have some innate skills or an innate aura that helps them survive. That just kind of helps them survive. Even awful pushes. Chad Gable's a prime example of that. He was able to survive Shorty G because he found a way to make it work. That's a testament to his charisma. Um, what all the other dumb shit they did with him. People want to see Chad Gable win. Chad Gable's going to be another one of those guys too, where when we come back in 5 years, we're going to be having radically different conversations about Chad Gable's status, as long as he stays healthy. A lot of these things take time, and when you have the luxury of youth, especially the WWE, if they're doing stuff with you on TV and you're young, when you're young, that means that you're gonna have a hell of a time when the roster, when the sands of the roster's foundation shift again, and certain people get to elevate because they do, they will throw out a chance. It's when you catch fire when you're a little older where it's a little harder, and you got to damn sure stay healthy to make sure you get your shot. I'm talking about specifically the case of someone like an LA Knight. The But again, it's a guy who a lot of people wrote off, but guess what? He has the physicality and he has the personality, and he looks like a superstar. He cuts his hair differently. He talks differently. He dresses differently. That's a lot of what Drew is talking about. Drew is talking about the guys who just show up and look like everybody else. And that is a big problem. It is a big problem. He's not talking about being in shape. He's talking about the guys who show up, and if you had them in the crowd, you go, "Hey, that guy's in pretty good shape," but you wouldn't necessarily know that he's a wrestler.
Well, speaking of help, WWE is now being a very helpful person. There's talk now. This is according to rumors, so who knows? Pro wrestling reporting is about as like the weatherman. Sometimes they get it right, a lot of time they get it wrong.
Most of the time, it's someone made it up in their basement.
You said that, I didn't, but I agree with that. There is talk now that because the PLEs are leaving Peacock, that now all of a sudden W is pushing heavily for AAA and TNA to go onto the Peacock channel. They need this. Both TNA and AAA need this. So for those who are going like, why is W doing this here? Let's start with that. Why would W want to, I guess, push TNA on Peacock when the conspiracy theorists will probably go, well, wait a minute, why doesn't W just buy out TNA and make it into a fourth brand?
Because they don't want to. It's that simple. If they wanted to, it would have happened already. They don't want to. This is about the wrestling future. Their territories are dead. It is what it is. But there is a big problem because the territories are dead and the indies are just dog shit. Back in the territory days, one there, the number of wrestlers that exist versus the availability of actual quality work is absurdly disproportionate. And we've talked about it here. We've talked about all the problems that exist with the indies. You have a lot of people who don't know what they're doing, who like to pretend that they do. You've got a lot of schools run by people who have never made it, who have never even gotten within an angel's hair of even sniffing it. They have no business teaching you. There's a lot of problems that permeate the indies. The What the WB is doing is they sign a lot of people because they know that they have heavy churn, and at the end of the day, like I'll give like a guy like Parker Bordeaux credit. He's out here trying to stay busy, and he said, "I'll teach you a seminar." Why is a Parker Bordeaux seminar better than what your local shindy star is going to tell you? It's because if Parker Bordeaux even remembered just half of what he was taught in the performance center, he is a 15 times better teacher than your local fat guy who's never done it. The WWE needs to create opportunity for athletes to perform on a big stage. And that means bright lights, live cameras, and different kinds of crowds. They also need this for future producers, future writers, future camera people, for just entire production staff. There needs to be more opportunity to generate a viable pipeline of talent in front of and behind the scenes. If they can help TNA get to the next level, TNA is not a threat. The WWE is on a radically different plane than everybody else. The WWE does not have competitors. They just do not. Someone labeling themselves the number two company, it is meaningless. It is meaningless to the WWE. This is not Attitude Era WWF versus WCW, where they were in the same where Eric Bischoff realized that the only way to compete is to get into the same business as the WWF. No one, doesn't matter what they tell you, is even remotely in the WWE's league. Um, but the WWE needs to establish an entry point for these young wrestlers. These young wrestlers need to be exposed to a lot of the basics, and that up to and including, living the hard life of travel. Adding a factor into being able to meet corporate demands and corporate edicts, and how to conduct yourself in a corporate environment. The WWE can only get but so many people on TV. The WWE can only generate but so many hours of TV. And I'm not even saying the WWE is remotely close to saturating themselves, because they are capable of producing a lot more. But they don't have enough TV time for the amount of people that they have currently signed, let alone the kids who are coming up. This is more about securing the future. If TNA can ascend to the next level, can get their pay-per-views presented on some place like a Peacock. That means that it's more eyes on the product. It helps them get an actual, real network show, or maybe the network show airs on Peacock every Thursday at blah 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 blah. And you can't see unless you tune in to Peacock. It's a value upgrade for Peacock. Same thing with AAA. These are things about creating exposure so that you can create a pipeline of kids who have the skill set necessary so when they get pulled into the WWE, they don't have to build you back up from day one. And being able to work a TV match is radically different than being able to work a wrestling match. TV matches have very specific formats. You have to hit certain notes at certain times. There's a lot of things you need to be hyper aware of. Not just knowing where the hard cam is, but you need to be aware of how the cameramen flow, of kind of how they're going to cut and edit, where you need to be. You need to be able to understand how to save it, if it goes off the rails really quick. And then you need to know the difference between getting your shit in and hitting your spots in the time that you have available. Because if you see a 6 minute match on TV, depending on your entrances, or rather, if you get told you have 6 minutes on TV, that 6 minutes includes your entrance. So depending on who you're wrestling, you may only have 4 minutes. You may only have 3.5 minutes. You've got to be able to tell a whole story in that 3.5 minutes. So it's a radically different skill set, and you can't teach TV without being in a position to do TV. So that's really what this is all about.
For TNA, how much do they need this? And I stress the word need because as well as they've been doing, and they turned it around. Credit to Carlos Silva, credit to the wrestlers, credit to Tommy Dreamer. They're still on pay-per-view appearances. They are still people who, it's 1 year deals for X amount of appearances here. For them to get to the next level, how much do they need? Just that 10 million, it sounds low, but for them, it's like we need to actually be able to invest more in wrestlers, pay
Yep.
wrestlers salaries, be able to recruit writers who want to come on, who've written on TV and go, hey, you want to write for a major network show or a streaming show and not something that's on Access TV.
Yep. No, it's true though. Listen, $10 million. You think about it like this: if your average wrestler is making 80 to 100K, if you take $1 million of that, that's you pretty much have now gainfully employed what a little under half of your roster. So that's why they took the deal. They needed to be able to invest in infrastructure, invest in talent to keep the people they really needed to keep, and they also need to have the ability to recruit, to recruit. They're in the middle of a growth cycle right now. So someone said, hey, these guys are worth $10 million. So as long as they can keep the trajectory going, the next deal is $20 million or $30 million. And all this without actually having a viable network TV partner. Because how many people know they have Access TV, if they even have Access TV? In order for TNA to grow, honestly, I would say I think TNA having a cable channel is more important, but also, Boba,
If
relax.
you're looking to grow, they need to have money. They need to be on a streaming service that actually people know and
Yeah,
can
that's it.
see. So yeah,
Yeah, so it's hey, calm down, man. No, stop it. The so they have to be in a position to to earn money. So if anything's better than what they got. The TNA app is pretty cool, but at the end of the day, TNA on Peacock is even better because it's NBC Universal. There's a lot of money. There's a lot of just if you randomly throw Eric Young on a random Peacock show, and then there's network sync. Someone's go, who's that? Or you have I don't know, Steve Macklin go get arrested on SVU. Hey, who's that guy? That guy's huge. Oh, he wrestles on a thing called TNA. Like it gets people talking, gets people googling. You know, a big prover of that is look at what a couple appearances on NXT have done, for TNA. The yeah, so yeah, there's no downside to it. I would personally prefer seeing TNA on a real cable network because it's a little it's a wider net. I know we like to pretend that cable's dead, but it's still a wider net. But if this is true, and not just not just a baseless conjecture of some guy trying to sell you a 14.99 newsletter that you should be getting for free, the or somebody trying to make some generate some news all from their mom's basement, the for their silly little, it's slightly better than a GeoCities website. The Then this is potentially great news for TNA, and especially for AAA. You know, the stronger these different brands are, it doesn't matter if it's inside of the WWE's wheelhouse or not. The more work there is, for younger talent, the better quality experience younger talent gets. The more people you have out there being able to teach people, it increases, and it fixes a lot of things. It fixes a lot of things. And also, on the back end of it, it puts wrestling companies um, back in a position, especially schools, in a position where they can be honest and they can tell, the blue hair with the stack of dimes for a neck, nah, bro, you don't get trained as a wrestler because you're not a wrestler, but you can be a manager. You can be a commentator. So this way now, when somebody goes to an indie show, it's not a bunch of 70 pounders in trash bag pants dropping each other on their necks. And now you get more than 20 people at going to indie shows now. There's got to be again, the bigger places do, the tighter the standards fall on the indie level. The tighter the standards on the indie level, the better the quality an athlete. The easier it is for that athlete to go get an opportunity. The better the big companies do, the more opportunities are for that kind of athlete. The more opportunities that athlete gets, the more likely it is that that athlete gets signed. Or if they don't get signed, they wind up in a spot like in the old days where like the old school days of the syndicated shows like Jacked, Metal, Velocity, all that stuff, where you used to see like a Christopher Daniels and a Samoa Joe every week. And case in point, I'll go guy I know, Damian Adams, where they are on essentially the travel squad, and they're racking up all this massive experience, and then they get to go open up their school and they have connects for their students. There isn't enough of that anymore. It is we are in a situation where it is the blind leading the blind, and there are not enough one-eyed men running around to tell these kids what to do and how to not be morons. So, you know, it's a self-perpetuating machine. It just needs some fuel.
Well, speaking of men telling other people telling what to do, our favorite old school Hall of Famer is back at it. That's right. The Undertaker and now Lance Storm are going toe to toe. So, yeah, I didn't have this on my bingo card for 2025. So let's start with the Undertaker on his 6 Feet Under podcast as he's talking to his wife, Michelle McCool. As he says, for me, I'm a notoriously old school dude. It's disheartening sometimes when I go to the shows. And if you can even find talent backstage watching matches, like most of them are filming TikToks, doing all this other stuff. Even when I was on the road full time, if you weren't sitting there watching the monitor, it was going to be a bad day for you. Lance Storm has responded, going, talent aren't on the road full time anymore. They have work 1 day a week. They have 6 days to watch matches back. Times changed. Many only see their friends 1 day a week now. I'm going to ask you first because you're in both camps. You know Undertaker in terms of who he is and everything. I know you respect him a lot. I know you know Lance Storm via osmosis with Tommy Dreamer. So it's not like two guys who don't take the business seriously. They both do. So first, do they both have a point? I mean, is there something where you can look at both and go, yeah, they're both right, and yet they're both need to maybe change their stance slightly?
Well, yeah, I think Lance Storm over responded to Undertaker because Undertaker said the word sometimes is important, right? The But Undertaker is also correct in the sense that it should be disheartening because every first of all, there are reasons why you watch to monitor, right? Because not every there's a lot of matches, there's a lot of people, there's a lot of linear thinking. You should be paying attention to the monitor, make sure that you don't go out there and do a match that has the same set of spots in it or the same ending or same closing as a match that was out there 2 matches ago. Well, people need to know what the other person's doing. People need to see how the crowd is responding. People need to see what's working, what's not working. That's really why you watch the monitors. The because also too, you don't know if something goes bad if you're needed. Someone gets hurt and you're by the monitors, and let's say you already wrestled, you may need to go back out there. So it's he's thinking in terms of, you should know what's going on with the show. You should be prepared to lend support. The TikTok thing, um, you know, it's kind of important in terms of driving engagement, a fan engagement, but it's also a distraction. And it just depends on where you're looking at it, right? It's the same mentality of if you're a working professional, wanting to send things via email or wanting to text somebody. It's just it's a different kind of feel. Undertaker isn't he didn't condemn it. He voiced his opinion. I don't know why Lance Storm felt he needed to respond so hard. But in that sense too, though, it's well, they only get to see their friends 1 day a week. But well, you have time, so with your time off, you should be at a gym working on your skills. You should be in the different kind of gym working on your body. The And you should be in contact with your friends because your friends are your peers. If you're talking about your private life friends, well, that's a different animal. But a lot of these guys live close to one another. A lot of these guys travel together. I don't quite understand why he responded so heavily. But yeah, it's a disproportionate response to what Undertaker was saying. And I don't really think he said anything wrong. It just requires a little bit of perspective. And yeah, I do think that the social media era does have different requirements of talent, but there is a balance, and I do think that that's probably something that has either accidentally been ignored, or isn't preached enough, is finding the balance between maintaining your social media presence and doing the things that need to get done, but also being aware of what's happening on the show. Yeah.
In argument of Lance Storm, here's what I would say to Taker. Wrestling shows are no longer wrestling. They are sports entertainment, full-on action movie shows. The last SmackDown, out of, let's say after you take out commercials, you have an hour and a half of action. 35 minutes was pro wrestling matches. 35. The rest of it, it's long promos, it's backstage segments, it's segments in the ring where Charlotte and Alexa are gonna, maybe they're teasing the hug and there's a long walkouts. So I get, if you're talented and you're not doing anything, wouldn't you be better off in the back? Like, hey, I'm gonna do a couple videos. I'm gonna try to get my name out there because, as you said, W's pushing that. They want videos of backstage content. They want access. Everybody wants to see what's going on behind. Like, as I said, and I love Undertaker, but how much is he sort of a relic of an era that sort of died out? And he still is one of those guys who he probably looks at Unreal and goes, "Oh my god, why the hell are we doing this here? I don't understand any of this." And it's sort of like, Taker, this is the 22nd, 21st century catching up. You gotta catch up here a bit, buddy.
No, I would say wrestling is wrestling, and the bones and guts of it are always the same. It doesn't matter what the era is. And again, you do have to have certain kind of standards. Standards are your foundation. You can't build upon a foundation of sand. So you've got to have a strong foundation. Because there are certain things that are never going to change. The again, I find absolutely nothing wrong with what Undertaker said. He gave enough room for his going. I understand that it happens, but it is disheartening, and there's a reason that it's disheartening, and it's up to the talent to be able to find that balance again. Because at some point in time, you don't want to be in a situation where your entire locker room is fucking off and not paying attention to what's happening to the show. Because if something happens, they're not going to be prepared. They're not going to be prepared to deal with it. And in turn, they're not going to be able to teach someone what to do if something happens and you need to be able to deal with it. Um, there is institutional knowledge that requires generational capture internally. And if I can't pass that down, it gets lost, and you spend more time trying to relearn it and reteach it than you would have if someone just paid attention. So that's what he's talking about. That's why he's saying what he's saying. Um, yes, and he is a relic of a bygone era, but that doesn't mean that, there isn't value in that. Well, if we spent a little more time rejecting modernity and embrace tradition, I think the world would be a hell of a lot better place. Just because it's new and shiny doesn't mean it's necessarily the right way to go. The and making excuses for coming up short in certain areas because it is a different era is not a very good excuse. That's kind of where I'm taking umbrage with Lance Storm. Lance Storm is a guy who should in fact know better. But I will also say Lance Storm is a guy who frankly teaches people in a very condensed format and sends them out into the world, and they don't know their ass from a hole in the ground, but they think that because they spent 6 weeks with Lance Storm, that they're a fucking superstar. So, you can take that what you will, but to me, it is kind of this is Lance responded to a nothing burger and tried to create something out of it that doesn't need to be created, because the Undertaker isn't correct. I mean, he isn't wrong. He's correct in what he's saying, but he also left the room for there to be like, hey, I get it though. It is what it is. But it's if you have done this at any level, you understand the perspective of from what he's talking about. If you've ever done a show that requires filming, requires TV, that takes itself seriously, technology affording, there is a monitor in the back where everybody can kind of watch the matches, and you should be paying attention to what's going on because you need to know what's going on with the flow of the show. Did someone have a shit match before before you went out there? Okay, cool. That means we got to change it up a little bit and get everybody. We got to get everybody hyped up. Or did the roof blow off the place? So now you need to, okay, well, is it possible for us to knock the roof off again, or do we need to cool it down so everybody still has energy for the main event? Did so and so get hurt and now the entire thing's fucked up, and now you're gonna need the promoter and the booker say, okay, hey, this I need you to go out there and I need you to go do these 5 things, and we're gonna try to salvage this, and the only way this works is if you do this right now. That's what's going on. Like, again, there's a perfect example. I think Eric Bischoff tells a story about how when he first got there, he had a segment early in the night, a segment in the middle of the night, and then he had nothing to do, so he packed up and left. And at the very last second, I think someone got hurt and they ended a little early. And Vince was looking for Bischoff to go out there to go cut a quick promo to set something up and buy them cover. And he wasn't there. He wasn't there. And Vince told Bischoff that he was disappointed in him. That's why you watch the show. That's why you pay attention. That's why you shouldn't be so engrossed and doing the TikToks that you're losing that perspective. Yes, the TikToks are important, but how many fucking TikToks can you make in one night?
Oh, you'd be surprised, Kevin.
I know,
This
like,
world, they can make like 100 TikToks.
I know, but like you are technically you're on the clock. You're on the clock. This is your job. This is your job. So like just because you kind of already did your part, you do still need to be paying attention. Because I'm going to feel like this. It could also something can happen, and it could be the difference of being a guy who is a number two match, who's the number two match in the show, who never has more than 6 minutes, and someone fucking tripped and fell, and now they're all fucked up. And now we got to go do an emergency segment because we lost. We have a brand new 10-minute gap. and you could be the one standing there, and I go, "This is my moment. We need you to go film. We need you to go film a promo with um with nameless brunette girl number 6. Um, and we're gonna have to do one of these quick things for you." And that could be the moment. That could be your breakout moment. Or are you too busy sitting in the locker room, self-congratulating on your ex, and trying to photobomb someone's Twitter or reel or Instagram reel? That's what he's talking about. He's not bitching about the making it. He's saying that there are layers to this that you need to be aware of, that take priority over the, if you made 10, do you really need to make 15? That's what he's getting at. And again, the Lance Storm thing, I think Lance Storm was just bored and was trying to make controversy so that people would be talking about him. But I've dealt with people who've come from the Lance Storm school, and they think they're fucking experts, and they really can't do shit. But they coughed up a lot of money and spent a few weeks someplace, and that's all I'm going to say about that.
Final point on the TikTok stuff here. Should there be more mandate on what is being taken? Because, and look, I hate to be the Charlie Kirk, who's moral authority here. Yes, shout out Charlie. I do love your stuff, but we've seen a lot of the female, especially the female wrestlers, where their TikTok videos are basically thirst traps, sometimes shaking their cheeks, not talking to ones above the head. And I get it. I'm an old man, old man yelling at grass. I don't be that guy, but I can tell Taker wants to say that. I was saying that should there be more like, okay, if you're going to do this TikTok video, make it professional, make it like something where, yes, I don't just be like a hot girl that probably looks like she belongs on OnlyFans, like something that shows who the character is, why I should invest in a Maxine Dupree or Natalia or an Ivy now rather than just, yeah, you're hot, you have good cheeks, and yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but that's a conversation for the office to have, because again, it depends too. The listen, these guys gotta do what they gotta do sometimes. Sex sells, but as long as you're not getting freaking record company, bad. Yeah.
I get that, but it's also
I
like,
don't, because like I don't. I'm kind of, because I don't listen. I'm like, you do whatever the hell it is you want with your time. Um, clearly the company will say we don't want you doing XYZ. The But I'm like, as long as it's funny, as long as it's tasteful, I can't really say too much. They do have people who make sure that people don't cross the line, and if those folks have not said anything, then, well, they know a hell of a lot more about this than I do. But I do wish that they would use. I think there's room to use their social media more judiciously than what it is.
and as I said, it's as you brought the music industry. It is the music industry. It's in terms of, I'm just gonna be the clean part. Are you looking at a musician because they're a great musician, or are you looking at it because they're a hot piece of ass? And
Oh,
that's the trouble. Like, okay, yeah, Cardi B is famous, but she's sort of, people look at her like, oh yeah, she's just,
no,
more of
she's
a porn
poor, bro.
star than
We
that.
we 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 can be honest about it. Cardi B, Nicki Minaj, Doja Cat. What's what's
Megan V. Stallion, yes,
Megan Thee Stallion? What's the one? The little uh, I don't know. They're all the same. They're all the same, cut from the same porny cloth. The I mean, like, there's no actual talent coming from those folks. So the only thing to do is talk about how they, pop their kitty and shake their ass, and it is what it is. But I think the difference is that if the girls have a skill set, that they have a viable skill set, they wouldn't have made it otherwise. The so yeah, sure, fine. Like, I understand you want to try to tap into certain trends and stay within the algorithm, which I think is actually really the bigger problem, is the algorithm, not so much even the content produced, but just what the algorithm encourages, and demands to be fed. The I don't. There's nothing wrong with the thirst trap as long as it doesn't cross the line. If they want to make jokes about their butts, whatever. It is what it is. Again, as long as you don't cross the line. But they also need to be aware that 50% of their audience is younger. And there should be I guess the Dennis Rodman mentality of I'm not here to be your kid's role model, but at the end of the day, there is a little responsibility because yeah, you are some kid's role model. But again, that is for we know how the WWE responds to certain things. So if something is problematic, the talent will be told about it long before any of us know anything about it. So if no one's bitching and moaning about it, I don't, I'm like, well, again, who am I? Again, there's a big difference between what these girls do and the nonsense that Tony Storm is doing, where because she has absolutely nothing to say. She has nothing to say, not an ounce of actual, real, true charisma. She's walking around talking about it's every press scrum is tits, cunt, farts, blah 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 blah. It's like I got it. Okay, I got it. How many times can you talk about your vagina and your boobs before you give me something substantive to work with? Apparently, it's zero. It's zero times. So the WB girls aren't doing that. They aren't doing that. They're not hypersexualized. They're just kind of knocking on the door. Again, hopefully we get, well, listen, I'll give Triple H this. He has facilitated a radically different environment for the girls than what you would have seen during the Vince era. Slash, things improved remarkably under the Vince era for the girls, but you know, I'm sure Stephanie had a lot to do with that. At the same time, sex sells, and there's apparently, part of Shawn Michaels' recruitment video is you got to have some ass. So, Shawn Michaels, the Heartbreak Kid, apparently likes cheeks. So I get it. If you got it, you got to flaunt it a little bit, but as long as just do it within reason. I can't bitch and moan about it.
Well, speaking
Not
of bitching and moaning, and speaking of crossing the line, we're gonna end this here with it's not that because it's all different story. Well, how am I gonna put this here in a polite way? MVP, yeah, I guess, is on the outs here. There's people upset, Kevin. We talked about here, and yeah, I guess he's being a meanie.
Yeah.
MVP's being a meanie, folks. That's according to Dave Meltzer. He's refusing to have Bobby Lashley drop the titles to, of all people, Mike Bailey. They don't want to put over certain people, even though even they said Fightful's not reporting, but MVP apparently has backstage heat with Mike Bailey in particular being disliked by MVP. That one person in Hurt Syndicate cut the MJF alliance short. This is I don't want to say I told you so, but I told people so. This was not going to end well. If you thought that CM Punk was a problem for the EVPs and Tony Khan, MVPs whole different ball of wax. So, Kevin, should we have expected this, and how much? If you're MVP in a Hurt Syndicate, you're going, yeah, we might have to leave soon because we might choke a bitch.
Well,
it's not funny. Somebody gets choked out.
I will say I don't believe most of this story. I just don't. I just don't believe most of this story. The Meltzer likes to craft stories in a way that he can offer up all perspectives of something so that he doesn't get to be wrong, but also cannot acknowledge when he is completely wrong. I don't really believe this. What I do believe is that MVP is very protective of Lashley and Shelton and himself, and he has some standards, and that there were probably times where they were asked to do something and they said no, and absolutely right, they should say no. Listen, at the end of the day, and this is going to be a problem for anybody from the WWE who goes to the $1 billion shindy. The You're leaving a place where your education isn't just in your ability to perform in a match. You have to learn every facet of the business. So, TV production, live show production, marketing, sales. And that's if you really truly take yourself seriously as a talent. Why, you have to be a you have to understand super psychology and why you need to do it, how to do it, and where to do it, on pay-per-view, on house show, and on TV. It is a super skill set that anybody who does this should want to acquire. You are an invaluable asset. Once you leave the Yankees, the yeah, like, for just lack of a better comparison, 'cause that's what the WWE is. They are the New York Yankees of wrestling. The Unfortunately, AEW fashions themselves to be the Red Sox, and they are not. They are, they're a minor league team. They're a minor league team playing big boy. But so anytime anybody who has that skill set, anytime anybody who it looks like they were carved out of marble, and is of a certain stature goes there, they're going to be in for it, because not only do they look the part, not only are they recognizable, they have more skills and are more prepared to lead and run than anybody there. So they're going to be hated right out the box. There's going to be silly attempts to sabotage them, oops, sorry, buddy, but by the never wases and never could be's, the who are scared that their spot's going to be taken. That's right out the box, right? So what, we can assume the Bucks stooped something off the Meltzer, and Meltzer crafted the story to try to hide the fact that he didn't get it from the Bucks, and then a lot of it's probably over exaggerated. And speed On what planet does the Speedball Mike Bailey defeat Bobby Lashley?
Oh, look, I agree.
I'm asking a serious question.
I don't know. Cause look, I get it. He's a black belt in karate. He's a D. I mean, and he's an excellent little athlete. I agree, but he MVP in Lashley, and even Benjamin looking, going, okay, if we're going to elevate somebody, we want this to be worth the time.
It's got to be worth.
They had to have personality. They had to look like they can actually fight us. Like the
Yep.
Outrunners, I guess they're supposedly high on. Okay, I see that. The Outrunners look in shape. They have some personality. I get that. I get why we're not big on Mike Bailey. My point is, Kevin, we should have seen this coming. MVP, I mean,
Absolutely.
MVP doesn't suffer fools. He's not going to take, crap from anybody. And the Young Bucks should have looked and went, crap, this is going to be like Punk, because he actually has backups. So we can't just storm the locker room with, as you call him, the gay cowboy and Kenny Omega, because Hurt Syndicate could probably trounce all four of those guys in one sitting.
Any of them by themselves, they would have been hurting on the entire Elite squad. Well, again, there was always going to be problems from that contingent. It just was, and let's be honest. The only reason that they went to AEW was to cash out. Because I'll be honest, Triple H fucked up with these guys hard. Bobby Lashley got screwed out of a WrestleMania match. He got screwed out of the match, out of the three-peat with Brock. We got forced into a storyline at Bray that didn't pay off, and then you threw him. Yeah, fine. He got the WrestleMania match with Bubba, and but you destroyed the Hurt. And from what we understand, Vince wasn't the one who called for the destruction of the Hurt business. We don't know who that was, but you broke up a faction that was extremely over before the faction really truly got a really good run out of it, right? Because the world was opening. The Hurt business and Bailey pulled the WWE through the lockdowns. The lockdowns were done, and it was time to kind of see what these guys could really do, and we broke them up for whatever reason. Then you separated and didn't do anything with them. You screwed Bobby out of two WrestleManias, and then you didn't do anything with the guy. So I get it. MVP was rightfully pissed because they were frankly disrespected. I think they suffered the consequences of being Vince's guys and not Triple H's guys. We've seen this happen kind of repeatedly. I think we're watching it happen to the Miz. We watched this happen to Brock. You know, if you're a Vince guy versus a Triple H guy, you get treated a little different for whatever reason. The They want there to cash out, but they also want there to win gold. On God's what for what reason or another? I don't understand it. You got Shelton Benjamin, one of the best ROH champions of all time, Bobby Lashley, a mega dominant champion, and wherever he's been, and they're grabbing ass with the tag team titles and with MJF. Where's this going? What is the purpose of it? And then we're watching the Hurt Syndicate MJF storyline play out significantly better on WWE TV with Grayson Waller and the New Day. Because this MJF story went nowhere, and it went nowhere fast. So I'm not shocked that someone said, can we end this, please? Because it's just wasting everybody's time. Because it was wasting everybody's time, including MJF's. There was no end game here. It was someone person. Oh, let's put the. Oh, well, it'd be fun if we put the if we put the nerdy. We put the white guy who thinks he's so cool, with the cool black guys, and let's see where it goes. That was probably the end all be all of the story. How is this supposed to elevate anybody? Because really, what makes sense is MJF wants to get back towards the title. He can't do it by himself because he's burned all his bridges. He's going to go use the Hurt. He's going to use the Hurt Syndicate to get back there. And in reality, Hurt Syndicate was using him to get Lashley towards the title. That wasn't the story they were telling. That's the story that made sense, but it wasn't the story they were telling. If that's not the story you're telling, you're wasting everybody's time. The how should the Neo Moxley story have ended? Really should have ended with him coming against a fucking 6'5" ebony wall that he crashed up against. Bobby Lashley should have been the one that pulled the title off of Moxley. Instead, we're stuck watching Moxley fight a 4 foot tall lesbian. I don't understand this, and this is probably why MVP's pissed off because they're down here and sure they're getting paid, but no one wants their time wasted, especially when you're at a point in your career where within 5 years, you probably don't want to be doing this anymore because you made all the money you want to make, and you don't want to be one of these guys who can't fucking walk in 10 years. So you're wasting talent. It's one thing to misuse talent. It's another thing to waste talent. And Tony's superpower is wasting talent. The Hurt Syndicate, they came in, they immediately moved the ratings and whatever that means for that terrible show, but they moved the ratings. They were hot off the presses from the WWE, and here we are months later with nothing really to show for it, except for the tag team champions. And what tag team in that fucking company has any business actually ever pretending to beat them? The Bucks should. The reality is it's almost somewhat like when you put the tag titles on Undertaker and Kane, right? You created a situation where it really should have been virtually impossible to ever remove those tag titles from them. So how do the Young Bucks? You can't put the Young Bucks in the ring with Lashley and Shelton. The Young Bucks look like old children anyway when you put them in there with FTR. What does it look like when you put them in there with the Hurt Syndicate? And then the other problem with the Hurt Syndicate is that they were with that AEW crowd, because they look the way they look, they move the way they move, and they're built the way they're built, and they have the pedigree that they have. They were being cheered as heels. So that's red meat for an AEW crowd that usually is a slave to indie Cirque du Soleil bullshit. So now you just expose what the AEW fan really wants. They want fucking men they want men who can legitimately kick ass. Uh-oh. That really fucks a lot of things up for the pretenders and the never should have beens who currently take up all the TV time. Right? Because that means that they should be remanded to their backup player time filler slots, as opposed to the main event space that they currently pollute. So yeah, the Hurt Syndicate's going to be a big fucking problem for everybody in AEW. But now they're there. So where do we go from here? Well, you think MVP Lashley's very polite, but Bobby Lashley just packs up and leaves. Shelton, Shelton's also a little polite, but Shelton also just pack up and leave. You release MVP, and now you open up the floodgates. He'll never stop ripping you. He just won't, and he won't give a shit. And he'll find every public forum that there is to bury this company. This company's already on the balls of its ass in terms of people taking it seriously. On top of all the lawsuits that they have.
What are the odds that they end up in TNA by 2026? Because Tony doesn't like confrontation. And you also know about the Young Bucks and Kenny, and especially Hangman and Moxley, they have a lot of pull. Whatever they want, they're going to get. They've made that clear. So when you hear this, and Meltzer's saying this because, as you said, we all know the Young Bucks are saying this via osmosis. So what are the odds that they're in TNA by February 2026 because Tony just lets them go after September, October, goes, I just look, you guys, nobody wants to play along with you guys, and it's a hostile working environment, and
Tony doesn't have the balls. Tony doesn't have the balls to release them early. He doesn't, and he doesn't have the knowledge. He doesn't have the business acumen to do it either. Tony's not going to want to pull them in the office and be like, "Hey guys, we're just going to cut you loose because this isn't working," because then he would have to explain what isn't working.
He already has it. They don't want to drop the titles. They want to do. I mean, again, this just feels like.
No. Meltzer said they don't want to drop the titles. They probably said we don't want to drop the titles to any schmucks going, because that was the other story, is that we'll drop it to, we're not going to drop it to anybody. We got to drop it to who's going to make sense that they're going to elevate them. The Hurt Business dropping the tag titles to FTR doesn't elevate anybody. The Hurt Business dropping titles to Private Party doesn't elevate anybody. So it's got to make sense. They're saying we'll do business, but business has got to make sense. That's how business is supposed to be being done anyway. Again, who it doesn't make sense for is the guys who know what the guys who can, if they did things that made sense in a company, would never touch a title. So that's why I'm like, Tony doesn't have the balls to do it. And I don't think they've also never encountered anything like this. CM Punk was a rogue, was a rogue entity. He got there, realized he didn't really want to fucking be there to begin with. But was going to make the most of it. These guys travel, as a unit, and they're like, well, no, we negotiate as a unit. You're not breaking them apart. You're just not. And there's a strength in there that the elite is going to have a really hard time trying to crash up against. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Like I look at Kenny Omega, I see a man who says, "I want to get the fuck out of here." I see a guy who's over it, and realizes that if his name is really going to mean what he wants his name to mean, it's not going to come from there. The Young Bucks have no choice. They're toxic. They're poison everywhere they go, and there's no one going to really put them on TV. So they got to find a way to make it work. Same thing for the Soy Cowboy. The guy who showed up to the end of the party, as the party was winding down, and just jumped in the picture so that he pretended that he was there from the beginning. That motherfucker was that guy was as Johnny come lately as you can get. But he gets to swing off the Bucks nuts, and gets a lot of credit. But what happened? You put that title on him, and the ratings fell through the fucking floor. So it's just it is what it is. I personally am a little tickled that this is allegedly happening right now, because it shows you how weak of a leader Tony is, but it's also going to expose that a lot of the shenanigans that happen back there, that happen to talent, is the faults of certain people, and those people, they can't hold a candle to what these guys offer. They can't hold a candle to their actual business acumen, and I say good luck, good luck, good luck, because you're gonna fucking need it, and they don't have enough balls to even want to try to step to them, because it'll be a prison assault. There'll be a lot of tears and grabbed ankles. If they even so much as thinking about wanting to clench a fist in their general direction. The and then and then and then if you push too hard, MVP will drop that. Oh, so what do you got a problem because we're melanated beings? Tony already has enough problems with how he deals with black talent. Now, I understand Swerve is his black god, but there was a lot of people who were done dirty before Swerve decided that he was going to that he was gonna do what
No,
he's done.
Tony loves black people. His two favorite wrestlers are black, Swerve and Mercedes Moné. Kevin, don't you know Mercedes Moné, hottest
I know.
free agent signing ever?
I know, but exactly. But again, I know that they're very convenient, right? Because everybody forgot about Scorpio Sky, Brandy. There's a lot of we love to know what really happened there. Cody gets ever closer to wanting to talk about it. A Big Swole. It seemed to be if you were of a certain shade, that there were issues. Hey, bro, when was the last time we saw Jay Lethal on TV that didn't involve Jeff Jarrett? For that matter, when was the last time we saw Sanjay Dutt? The so Tony's got enough problems out letting his overpaid marks create more problems, and that into itself is the heart of it. Is that I'm sure these guys should at least even tacitly aware, if we push too hard, this doesn't go our way. If we push too hard, we wind up with our asses kicked. If we push too hard, we wind up destroyed on the internet. If we push too hard, Tony's going to make a choice, and I don't think they're prepared to have Tony make a choice that Tony may actually make, because at some point in time, too, especially as the issue of ownership comes into question, well, whoever is invested is going to say, "Hey, man, it's been 6 years. It's been 6 years. There should have been a period of growth. We don't care about your network deals. Everything else is in the shitter." So if it wasn't for Daddy's relationships, the show probably wouldn't have wound up on this network. So what happens if you wind up on a smaller network? What happens if you wind up on FSN that doesn't have the reach of a TNT or a TBS? What's the strategy? What's the go home here? Oh, great, you have your shows up on Amazon. Well, guess what? Any asshole at $20 a month can get their promotions events put up on Amazon. That's nothing spectacular here. Where is the growth? What is the strategy? What is the plan? How do you get more wrestlers on TV that are taken seriously by the general public? You've got three or four. You got these three guys here. They were from the WWE. How come you haven't done anything with them? Those are the questions that are gonna have to be asked or eventually addressed if these little idiots want to go make a big show out of it. And I don't think that I would hope they're at least smart enough to understand. Hey, if you crack this dam, the consequences are going to be astronomical.
Unfortunately, it's all the time we have, folks. So once again, we always love having him on the show because he is unfiltered, uncensored, and uncooked. I give you once again the man with more jobs in the federal government, and he runs them well. I give you the Wardog himself. I give you Kevin Apollo. So Kevin, once again, where can fans check you out at? Where is the, dare I say, podcast, the Twitter, Instagram, and what's going on with American Coliseum Wrestling? I hear there's some big things planned for the fall. So tell us what the hell is going on here.
Yeah, so Tuesdays and Friday nights, you can check me out with Lauren Connor on the WDW Pro Network on YouTube for Late Nights with Lauren and Apollo, where we talk about talk about pop culture news and maybe do some deep door lore dives and play some games and try to have some fun with the audience. Outside of that, you got me on Instagram at the House of Apollo, the House underscore Apollo. Twitter is Wardog Apollo. The and you know the Wardog YouTube channel is there. The Wardog House of Apollo YouTube channel is there. Feel free to subscribe. There'll be videos dropping soon. I was working on some content. One's going to be a sports show. One's going to be just a standard fare. We talk about some news, talk about some entertainment news. It's gonna a lot of different things in there. American Coliseum wrestling. Again, we're in the middle of just kind of developing things for the brand, for the brand changes. But you can check us out this weekend if you're local. If you're in the New York area, come to Rockland County to the Haverstraw Community Center for 2 o'clock. We're doing a show there. Again, the same thing. Third Saturday of every month, we'll be out of the Haverstraw Community Center. This fall, we've got a couple big shows coming up, but I don't want to talk about it too much until I can confirm. The appearance of these names. If they can do it, excuse me, it'll be fun for everybody. But a lot of big stuff coming up. It's there's only so much time in the day, so we're working on it. And then I'll give ACW underscore Coliseum a follow on Instagram as well.
Kevin and Paul, ladies and gentlemen, once again, always on a pleasure to have you on the show. We come back, a lot more going on here, only on its Last Call. Last Call with the Alcohol, only on the Last Call YouTube channel.